Hey everyone, this is Nico Earnshaw from the Centron Foundation, and in this video we're going to keep looking at smart items. This is part 3 in our series, and in this particular video we're going to focus on states and in conditions. So both these things combine to make things a lot more interesting and allow you to have interactions that are a lot less straightforward. And we're going to start by looking at doors. Doors are fairly simple, but they have one thing which is kind of interesting, which is they have two possible states. They can be open or they can be closed. And the way you interact with the door, if it is currently open or if it is currently closed, may differ. So in the previous videos, we looked at some of the basic smart items, and we particularly looked deeper into the button. And I mentioned before that the button has a GLDF component, a transform component, which are the two basic building blocks. So the GLDF tells you what something looks like. The transform tells you where it is, how it's rotated, and its scale. The action tells you what are the things that this item can do. In this case, the button can play an animation and it can play a sound. And the button has a trigger component. In this case, it has a single on-click trigger event, which both activates the two things I mentioned before, which is plays an animation and plays a sound, both from the button. And in this case, we configured it so that it also calls the door, and it activates the open action in the door. Now, the door is not all that different. It also has a GLDF component, it has a transform component, it also has an action component, a trigger component, which we will look deeper into now, but it also has a new component, which we haven't seen yet, which is the states component. And the states component simply lists the possible states in which the door can be in at a given time. So the door at any given time can be either open or closed. And it has a default state, which is closed. The door starts as closed when the scene first loads. So basically the states component determines that the door can be open or closed. And now we're going to use the states as part of our conditional logic so that we are sometimes running some actions and sometimes other actions depending on if the door is currently open or closed. That's the essential idea behind all of this. So let's look at the actions that the door has. It has a set state action of open, which basically changes the state from being closed to open. And it has another set state action, which is named closed, and also changes the state from open to closed. Then we will see some actions that are a bit more familiar. We have a play sound action, just like we had in the button, and we have a play animation action. We have two of these animations actually. One plays the open animation, and the other, of course, plays the close animation. So these are the things that the door can do. That is what the actions component determines, the things that the door is capable of doing at any point in time. And the trigger component tells you when these actions are meant to be carried out. So you will see that the trigger component of the door has two on-click different trigger events. One of these plays the open action on the door, and the other one plays the close action on the door. And you notice that both of these have trigger conditions, and these conditions check the door's state. So basically, if I click on the door and it's currently closed, I want to open it. And on the contrary, if I click on the door and the door is currently opened, I want to close it. So it's that straightforward. And basically, our states component is what allows me to determine what are the possible options that I use down in this menu. Now, of course, playing the open and close actions that we saw up here only really changes the state of the door. When I open the door, I'm actually not like I'm seeing three things happen. One is that the state changes, but also I'm seeing an animation being played, which is this play open animation, and I'm also hearing a sound being played, which is this other play sound action. Now, what's interesting about the door smart item is that when I click on the door, I'm not directly playing the animation or the sound, as would be the case with the button smart item, which we saw in another video. And if I look at the button smart item and I look at its trigger event, you will see that I am directly playing the sound and the animation as part of the direct result of clicking on the button. On the other hand, when I'm talking about the door, when I click on the door, I'm just changing the state. I'm not playing the sound or the animation. And that is because I'm doing that in a set of other trigger events down here. So the trigger component is in fact having 4 different trigger events. In 2 of these, I'm changing the state conditionally, and on the other 2, I'm reacting to that change in state. And in this case, I am playing the animation and playing the sound. So the reason why I'm doing this is that it makes the use of the door more easy from the outside. Because now if I want to have this button activate the door, for example, I don't have to make the door, I don't have to make the button change all 3 things. I don't need to have the button directly also play the sound of the door and play the animation of the door, which I could do if I wanted to. I could select the door here and play the sound of the door. But that just makes it more tedious. And like it's more error prone. So it's easier to just need to set the state of the door to open and let the door's internal logic handle what that change in state means. And in this case, as we saw here, when the state changes and this condition is met, meaning that when the state changes and the new state, the state of the door is open, then I will play the things that relate to the door being opened. So I will play the open animation and I will play the sound. And on the contrary, if I again change the state and the new state of the door is closed, then I will play the closed animation and I will play the sound. In this case, it's the same sound. If I wanted to, I could have 2 different sounds in the door and play one or the other depending on which action I'm doing. So that is the behavior of a door in a nutshell. So let's jump into preview mode now. In one of my previous videos, I configured the button so that it opens the door. What I didn't tell you though is that if I click on the button a second time, you'll see that the door just keeps opening, and it's pretty unnatural for the door just to snap back into being closed and just get open again. And that is because the button is not paying attention to the states of the door. It's every time I click on the button, I'm simply calling the open action of the door without any consideration for what state the door was in before. And I can easily fix that by adding a trigger condition to my trigger event here. And now I can pick the door again and make sure that the door's state is closed. Otherwise, I'm not going to run the open action. And I can create a brand new trigger event so that my button now has 2 trigger events, both of them on-click events. And I can give this, again, a trigger condition. And in this one, I want to make sure that the door's state is open. And when the state is open, I want to make the door close. So when I click on the button, if the button is closed, I want to open it. And if the door is closed, I want to open it. And if the door is open, I want to close it. And also on this trigger event, let's add the other actions that belong to the button itself, just so that the button plays its animation and it plays its sound, so that it is consistent each time. So now with this, I should be able to toggle the door and open it and close it just like I could before with my lever. Now, if I click on the button, it opens, and if I click on it again, the door closes in a much more logical and natural way. Great. The other thing I want to change about the door is that besides being able to open and close it via the button, I can just walk up to the door and open it and close it like this. And I mean, this feels a bit like cheating, because otherwise, why do I have this button at all? But what I can do is I can get rid of some of the trigger events that I have on the door. Remember that I said I had 4 trigger events on the door. 2 of them have to do with clicking on the door and like checking on the state, and the other 2 have to do with reacting to changes in the state of the door. I want to leave these 2 because these are being used by my button indirectly, but I want to get rid of the 2 first ones where I am reacting to clicks that happen on the door itself. So I can click here and remove the trigger condition, and also do that for the second trigger event. Let's remove the trigger event, sorry, not the trigger condition. So now I only have 2 trigger events on my door, and both of them have to do with reacting to the state of the door and not with clicking on the door directly. So again, I can jump into preview and see how this affects my scene. Now, if I come up to my door and try to click on it, I am not able to open my door anymore by clicking on it. I can only open the door if I click on the button. Great. Now let's dive one level deeper into the kinds of things you can do with this. Because right now I have a single condition for controlling how this button interacts with the door. I can add more conditions. I can click on this plus sign here in the trigger condition and add as many conditions as I want, so that the actions here only happen if a series of conditions are met. So for example, let's add this lever here, which kind of looks like a power switch, and let's make it so that I'm only able to open the door if the power is up. If the power is not up, I can't open the door. So let's set the rotation to 90 here, or no, it's to 70. Yes, here we are. Let's make it a little bit higher so that it's a bit more visible. And is that like close enough? Yeah, that looks good enough for me. So now this lever behaves just like the other lever we saw before. It has some actions that change its state and an action that plays a sound, actions that play animations, and it has a trigger condition that changes its own state. So the levers, by the way, have states just like doors, right? They have an activated and deactivated state. In this case, we don't want to do anything with the changing of the lever itself. So when we click on the lever, we're just going to switch between the 2 states of the lever, but we want to listen to what the state is on the lever whenever we try to do actions with a button. So when we try to click on the button, we're not just going to check if what the door's state is to check if the door is closed. We're also going to check the state of this other lever to make sure that the power is up. And we're only going to open the door if the power is up, and we're not going to do nothing if the power is not up. So I'm going to add another condition here, and notice that on one hand I have another line for conditions appearing here, and I also have this other drop down which is also new. Here I am able to choose an operation type. I'm going to cover this right now in a minute, but first let's just add another condition, and I'm going to select the sci-fi lever, which is this new thing I just added, and make sure the state is activated. And with this, I want to make sure that both these conditions apply, and otherwise I want to do nothing. So this new dropdown allows me to select 2 different modes to evaluate multiple conditions. So I can either do an and or an or. I can either make sure that all of the conditions are met, or I can only check for at least one condition to be met. So in this case, I want all conditions to be met, so I will select this value. But in some cases, maybe I want to, I'm good enough with only one of the 2 conditions being met, and with that, I want to also go forward and do the actions. And I also want to do the same for closing the door. Of course, if there is no power, I can't open or close the door. So I'm going to also add another condition here. I want to make sure that we use an and as well. And I'm going to select the sci-fi lever, and I want to make sure that it is activated as well. So now the button should only open the door if the lever is up. Let's see that in action. Of course, here in this game, these elements are pretty close to each other. There isn't much of a challenge in finding them, but you can, create all kinds of fun puzzle games where you gotta, work a bit more to find the solutions to your problems. So anyway, if I click on the door, nothing happens. Now if we click on the button, nothing happens either. I'm not seeing the door open. I'm not even seeing the button being, activated. But if I first come here, turn on the power, now I can click on the button and open the door. If I turn off the power, again, I'm not able to do anything with the button. I have to turn the power back on, and now I can open the door. So great, that's all I wanted to share in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was clear enough, and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks.